Welcome to the Mile High Podcast. This is your host, Dr. Daniel Knowles, coming to you from an altitude of 5,280 feet. And wherever you are, make sure you hit subscribe, whether you're listening, watching this on YouTube or Stitcher or iTunes or any of the other dozen channels that you can find the Mile High Podcast. And of course, dial in for being at Mile High Altitude in September of 2023, Mile High 11. Yes, these go to 11. It's the 11th Mile High. So today, I have to tell you, I am so super thrilled to have our guest today on the Mile High Podcast, Dr. Simon Senzon. Incredible friend, also incredible chiropractor, graduated of 1999 from Sherman College. Recently, PhD recipient, has his new book, the work together with Dan Limburger, another great friend, the Triune of Life, Reggie Gold, Philosophical Legacy. I'm sure we'll be talking about that, but also I have a whole stack of the white books. Oh, I got them. Look at this. I got a whole stack of them here, and hopefully you guys have these too. So we're going to be talking about some of those, but Simon runs the Institute Chiropractic. It's Institute Chiropractic. It's the premier online continuing education portal for all things chiropractic. It was founded in 2016, and the mission of the Institute Chiropractic is to preserve, evolve, and teach the history of ideas in chiropractic through the complete online learning center. So really incredible, all the things that Dr. Simon Senzon does, and grateful to be friends with him since being at school at Sherman. Thank you for taking the time to join us today, Dr. Simon Senzon.
Yeah, it is my pleasure to be here. We've come a long way from when you were my intern in the health center.
This is true. That was quite a while.
Totally.
Yes. And from you helping me out in my office too. Quite a while.
The first office. Yeah, I did help. Yep. I remember it well.
And our friendship goes back that long. So I'm excited to have you share today. You have exciting things going on. First, let's briefly help people catch up, because people may not know you personally. Can you share just a little bit of how you found your way to the chiropractic profession?
Yeah, I guess so. I started receiving care when I was 4. Dr. John Pagano, who was a Lincoln chiropractic grad, which I didn't know that until after he passed. He practiced 55 years. Amazing chiropractor. I was brought to him because I had psoriasis pretty profoundly as a child, and he was following the teachings of Edgar Cayce, which was a psychic prophet who told people to do these natural cures. And for chiropractic, it was 2 adjustments a week and natural eating, just lots of water, no sugar, no preservatives. And so I went on the whole program with him. My mom drove me 45 minutes each way over the GW Bridge twice a week.
Wow.
And 4 months, my whole body cleared up, which was really amazing. And then I went to chiropractors in high school after an auto accident for a bit. And then right after college, I started under network care. Right after Donnie had sold the practice in Belmore. So David Breitbach and Robin Sherman. And then I was working on my master's. I finished my bachelor's in history, and then I worked on my master's in philosophy. And I ended up working at a chiropractic office as a CA while I did my master's for a bit. And then I decided I could do this. I could do chiropractic school. It seemed like a lot more hands-on for me than just writing books and teaching and things. So I had, as I left, I was in Santa Cruz, California for a while. And I remember I called you from California to say, well, tell me about this place, Sherman. You're the only person I know of. I didn't even know you then, but somebody gave me your phone number. And you were like, come to Sherman. So sure enough,
I still say that to people.
yeah. So, and I had set up my first teaching gig before I got to Sherman. So I hadn't even finished my prereqs. I had one more course to take in California. I bailed on it because I got offered an adjunct philosophy position at Limestone College in Gaffney, South Carolina, which was about a half hour from Sherman. So I just came out to South Carolina, finished my prereqs there, started teaching philosophy, and then started Sherman. So it's been quite a journey, really.
Awesome. So let's talk about the topic at hand, which is the Triune of Life, Reggie Gold's philosophical legacy. It was phenomenal. I just received this in the mail just the other day, and it was phenomenal being on the tribute call that we had the other day with so many wonderful chiropractic brethren, sisters, souls. Can you share a little bit starting out? Let's go way back to what you just said. School, you being at Sherman. So preferencing this, what was your first connection to Reggie Gold?
Well, Reggie used to come to campus quite a bit.
Yeah.
He would do those all school assemblies, and I don't think all school assemblies at Sherman are quite like they were back then. Because when I got there in '96, Sherman had just gotten their accreditation with CCE.
Right.
And Sherman had just gone 25 years without getting CCE accreditation.
I know, I was there.
On principle. Yeah, you were there.
Yeah.
And so the students like you who were ahead of me were just a whole nother class of students, because a lot of them started Sherman knowing that they could never go back home to their states because they weren't approved, but they wanted the Sherman education anyway. So there was a rowdy bunch of hardcore straight chiropractors. So assemblies were always an adventure, bagel fest, these kind of things. And Reggie, yeah, it was like I thought about it, and I wrote about this in the book in the introduction. I feel like I probably took Reggie for granted back then because he was around all the time. He was just amazing, and it was just kind of like the water you drank or the air you breathed. Like Reggie was just there, But my favorite memories, though, of Reggie that really stand out from being in school was on Sunday at Lyceum.
Right.
There was like a lot of people had left by then. It was just a few core people and all the students who were busy setting up everything and taking down everything.
Right.
And Sunday there was a big tent on the campus, and Reggie would be up on stage, and he would just host people to come up on stage and just share their chiropractic story. And he was the MC, and it was just so touching every year. It was my favorite part of Lyceum. And then after that, everybody would sing this song, "Carry It On."
Right.
And it was just a moving experience. It was really my favorite.
Yeah.
And then I'll never forget, I spoke once, the first time I spoke at New Beginnings. Reggie went on before I spoke, because they didn't, it wasn't like, it was just New Beginnings. So Reggie would speak, and and then other speakers would go. And I don't recommend ever speaking after Reggie. Especially your first time at New Beginnings. But it was it was nice. A lot of good memories. And
that was really something special. I mean, I remember being at the all school assemblies, and people were excited to go to assembly. They looked forward, like, oh yes, who's going to speak this time? And sometimes we knew, sometimes we didn't, but we were always excited about who it was and to hear what they shared. So amazing. It's so exciting. And when it was Reggie, people would be super thrilled. So now fast forward a whole bunch. What brought the impetus to put this together?
Well, Dan Limburger and I, we sat down about almost 2 years ago now, about a year and a half ago. And I asked Dan if he would come on board and help with the Institute and really help me like I was finishing up my PhD, and I knew I wanted to really focus my energies on the Institute and growing the Institute and putting out more books. And so we had a brainstorm session for about a day, and Dan said, let's republish the Triune of Life. So we just started brainstorming that really brilliant idea. If you don't know, back in 1998, when we were still at Sherman, or I was,
yeah, I was still in the area.
You were still in the area. Yeah, they put out this little white book of the Triune of Life,
right?
Little hardcover. David Koch helped get it published. Reggie endorsed it. And that's how a lot of people got introduced to Reggie's Triune of Life. And we decided, it's time for an update. Let's republish it as a white book. And I think of the white books as that's really the first one. I always think of it as that's kind of the lineage. And then we started brainstorming of, well, let's invite people who were Reggie's students, people who were, taught by Reggie for years. That we know there's so many people whose lives he transformed, who are currently leaders in the profession. So let's just invite a whole bunch of them and see if they want to share some anecdotes, some stories, or even some more kind of scholarly looks at the Triune of Life. So, and then it sort of evolved from there. So we put out a call for papers about a year and a half ago for chapters and essays. And then we started talking about how we really wanted to expand on it more, especially as we started reading what was coming in. And people were talking about not just the Triune of Life, but the talks that Reggie gave and the tapes that people spent years listening to, and these cassette tapes they would put in their cars and then wear them out and have to buy them again because they listened to them so many times.
I'm one of those people.
Yeah. There's a lot of the stories in the book, they say the same thing. I listened to it again and again. Somebody handed me this tape and we listened to it together for every time we got in the car.
Yep. So I would do that because we would go to seminars
right
in Atlanta at Life or in the Atlanta area. We'd drive down and we put Reggie cassettes or other cassettes in the car, and listen to chiropractic going to and from,
Totally. Yeah. So we decided, well, let's really make the book more substantial. So we took two of his most iconic lectures that are available on YouTube, and we had them transcribed. So the book itself, it starts with the Triune, and then there's a chapter that I wrote, which we could talk about, and then there's different essays and chapters that people wrote mentioning the Triune, and then the book has another Reggie thing. So there we've got the Triune of Life, the Valley of the Blind, Reggie's lay lecture, which includes the chemistry talk, and then his little article that he wrote called The Third Paradigm. Mm-hmm. So it's really, the book is in 4 parts, all punctuated by these Reggie writings or talks. Mm-hmm. And then we've got these essays by people that kind of come after each one of them. So it's spread out really well, and it's just, people just point back and forth to these talks and to each other. And there's so many similarities in the stories that it's really amazing when you read it to see how much he impacted people and the consistency with the way that he impacted people. And he was just a gifted speaker.
He was. Yeah.
And he had the ability to take the complex and make it really simple for people.
Right.
Just take chunks of it and take it with them and share it with their patients, and then their patients would get it.
Right.
So the impact is worldwide, and I'm guessing it must be into the millions of people that he impacted.
Well, we know the famous saying, never know how far-reaching something you say, do, or think today will affect the lives of millions tomorrow. I think of things of I don't know if you know this. I went to Sherman College on a whim to visit because it was a family trip. Do you want to go to South Carolina for us? Donnie is speaking. and they kept telling me to go be a chiropractor and go to chiropractic school. And I was like, oh no, I'm not going to do that. And I went there on the trip, and then I said, oh, I'll sit and listen to some of the presentations. And in La Sherman Lyceum, I don't know the order of the speakers, but Donnie, Joe D'Onofrio Sr., Reggie Gold, and Arnaud. And by the end of that, I was going to chiropractic school. I was like, this is exactly what I want to do with my life. And said in such a way between those four people. So now let me ask you.
First, how I do know that story.
Oh, how?
It's in the book.
Oh. Well, there you go.
In more detail. So when you read the book, you'll get it.
That's true. Yeah. You can find out more details when you pick it up, and people can go get it at Amazon. So I'm going to say that many times through this. Just pick this up at Amazon.
Yeah.
So and put a review for it on Amazon. Now let's talk a little about the importance of the triune of life. That philosophical centerpiece for our profession. Why is that particular principle so important?
Yeah, and that's really what Reggie really helped people to understand, that it stands alone as a cornerstone of the philosophy in the profession.
Mm-hmm.
Like you could pull it out of the 33 principles and still have a solid core philosophical understanding of chiropractic. You can't really do that with any other part of the 33 principles as its own sort of standalone integration of ideas. So that on its own is really incredible, because the integration of intelligence, matter, and force, it not only sums up how life is expressed, how the subluxation could interfere with the transmission of the intelligence, but also what we're made of, right? It goes to the core of the philosophy, where Reggie even starts with universal intelligence and goes through the whole process of universal to innate. He tells the story, and what I was able to do in my part, and that's why the book took more than a year. We were hoping to publish it last year, but my PhD just took longer than I imagined it would. So when I finally sat down, I submitted the PhD, and then I decided to write my chapter, which I had started some of the research on a year ago, but I really sat down, focused, and got it done. And it turned into about 40 pages of a history of the triune in chiropractic, which is really just a cool thing to understand how the idea came from BD and BJ to Stephenson and his students.
Right.
And then one thing I discovered was that there was a sort of a tradition at the Palmer School of PhD students to publish articles and their PhD thesis and use the triune or describe the triune in different ways.
Right.
So I found about 10 or 15 different essays published in the Chiropractor, written by PhDs who mentioned the triune.
Wow, that's so interesting.
Yeah, so Reggie was part of this tradition, because that was his PhD thesis.
Wow. So these are people long before him.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and one thing I found, which is a discovery that I dropped on Facebook the other day, is that the first known use of that term, the triune of life, isn't in Stephenson's text. It's actually the year before his text in an article by one of his students.
Oh, wow.
I think it was her PhD thesis. So it looks like she's just summing up what she learned from Stephenson, but she actually coins the term the triune of life, which she may have gotten it in the classroom from Stephenson, but he hadn't written it down anywhere yet. So as far as we know, he might have got it from her, that particular phrase, which is kind of cool. I mean, people use triune, and Stephenson was already writing about triunity and he was writing about the 100% matter, intelligence, and force. And he was already writing about all that, but he hadn't used that particular phrase, the triune of life. So it's just one little historical bit that I thought was really
that's very interesting. Is it possible to get any of those other people's papers? From other about the Triune of Life, the other PhDs?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've got all the references in the chapter.
Ah, got it.
So that's a start. And Palmer has all of those old issues of the Chiropractor posted on the digital archives at the Palmer Library.
Oh, wow.
So that's one way people could just see the reference and go find that issue and read it. And not too many of them go into real depth about it, but there were some cool things I found, how sort of the ideas of the triune sort of evolved, which I found really interesting. Like BJ Palmer in the earliest days, he had a few different kinds of triunes. He had one that was like mechanical, chemistry, and time. Like one of them, he included time in his triune in 1913 when he started to write about momentum, right? Where we know Stephenson's classic Momentum of Disease. This was another really interesting thing that I found. So BJ from like 1909 to 1907 really to 1916, he came up with several different triunes, and they were all similar, but there wasn't, it was like the ideas were kind of growing and evolving. And then in 1913, he came up with force, matter, and time as a triune.
Oh, wow, that's very interesting.
Yeah, and then time became principle number 6, where the triune was 4 and 5 in the 33 principle. So it's like it's just interesting how the ideas changed and evolved.
Wow,
which is in the chapter. People can go into the more detail. We'll probably develop a more hour-long lecture just on that history.
That's very interesting
and cool.
Building on that, can you share a little bit about philosophically Triune of Life, intelligence, force, matter, why, not from a historical standpoint, but why or how that really helps a person get the importance of it as a cornerstone for the philosophy?
Right. Yeah, sure. Well, I think when people talk about what is the rationale for adjusting, right? Why do we adjust? And the key to it is the interference with the transmission,
right,
and the introduction of the force. And the triune is kind of the nexus for all of that. Right?
I love that word.
It gives us, kind of an understanding of how those things come together and why they're important, right? The intelligence being expressed through matter gets interfered with, right? And it takes the force of the chiropractic adjustment to allow for that expression to happen.
Right.
And that's, I think, really where Reggie took the profession in a whole nother direction, because he focused not only on the traditional chiropractic that was taught to him at Palmer, which was in essence a non-therapeutic approach, right? Because they were doing thermography scans and x-ray analysis to determine where to adjust, right? And when to adjust. And even though they were taking lists of symptoms of patients and writing down, what's changed for them, but Reggie focused on the importance of the expression of the intelligence and life as organization, right?
Yes. That's such a life as organization, such an important
point. So, and we like to think of it in terms of like thermodynamics, right? Where the force moving through the living system, the energy moving through the living system is expressed as organization. and the optimal expression of the organization. When we get to the higher end of it, we could really talk about human potential, which is really what Reggie really brought to the profession, where
Mm-hmm.
the key to understanding or defining subluxation is to make sure we include the organizational component, right?
Right.
How the expression of organization can be interfered with. And when that's expressed, we're focused more on human potential that is going to be expressed, right? Not just health or getting people well.
And that's what I was my impetus to go to chiropractic school, is that this is the organizational construct of the body. Construct might be too mechanistic a term to use, but the organizational essence of the body that you're influencing. So so important. Now, many have talked about how much Triune of life, intelligence, force, matter, is really, in essence, modern thermodynamics is, in essence, into the Triune of life.
Yeah, I agree. And when I was in the health center at Sherman, I used to do those health talks that it was a mandatory thing, right? You were on the schedule that day to give anyone a health talk, and hopefully it was your patients who were coming in that day or something. I think that's how it went. And the talk I used to give, because I like to think out of the box and bring all those ideas together, I used to draw a bathtub with the water going down the drain, self-organizing into a spiral, flowing down the drain, right? Because that's the principle of a self-organizing system. A spontaneous whirlpool kind of fits that, just that definition. It's not a living system, but it's that same principle. And then I put a little plug stopping the flow of energy going down the drain, and the spontaneous whirlpool dissipates, right? And I equated that to how a subluxation will affect the body's ability to self-organize. So it was looking at that idea of thermodynamics, that energy moving through the living system. The living system takes that energy and uses it to organize itself.
Right.
And that's what David Koch did. And that's one thing I really got from reading this book, reading everybody's essays, was how much all of our teachers were Reggie's students, right?
Yes.
So that's big for me. Donnie and Arno and David Koch and Graham Dobson and Ralph Boone, all these mentors of ours were all Reggie students. So we're like third generation Reggie students in that regard. And just that idea that the living system. Well, what I was saying with David Koch, in his book, he suggests that we shouldn't call it the Triune of life. We should call it the Triune of organization, because he wanted to distinguish the difference between universal life, where we could say everything, all matter has some kind of life because it's intelligence, to focus on a living system, which is organized, actively organized. So he proposes that, let's call it the Triune of organization, which is just another cool piece to the history of these ideas, which I really like.
That's
so
crux.
Fascinating.
Fascinating. So now you have, many people may not know this, a few may, you now have a PhD in chiropractic, which is different than a PhD in chiropractic, significantly different. Can you share about this, your PhD process, and congratulations from everybody at Mile High in achieving that milestone?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm waiting. I should hear any day now. All the paperwork is in. I'm waiting to hear any day from the dean. Probably it should come this week, because everyone closes down there for about a month in Australia. But I did the program at Southern Cross University in Melbourne, which was fortunate because I was able to do the whole thing through Zoom meetings and phone calls and stuff. So I didn't have to go to Melbourne, which, although it might be fun to go and walk across the stage and get the actual degree, that might happen. I'm not sure yet. But there were a few other people before me who were doing their PhDs in what was then called the School of Health Sciences at Southern Cross University, which is now just called the Faculty of Health. That's the name of the school. So I started in one school and then they changed the name before I graduated. So it'll be at the Faculty of Health. But on my enrollment, when I got online, I said, PhD, and it just said chiropractic. And I was like, wow, that's cool. I am actually doing a PhD in chiropractic. Two people have graduated before me. There's kind of a little, we've got sort of our own little pod of cohort of chiropractors in this program, working on their PhDs. Joel Alcantara is in the program. Matthew Doyle in Australia, Donald McDowell just graduated last year, and he did his PhD on tone, on D.D. Palmer's concept of tone. He went through all of D.D. Palmer's patients' testimonials and correlated them to see what D.D. was taking.
How do you find D.D. Palmer's testimonials?
Yeah, well, in his advertisings, he put some testimonials.
Right, yes.
So he organized them all and figured out where people were from, and just it's really an amazing document.
Wow, exciting.
Yeah,
it's so exciting.
Yeah, and Dennis Richards also, he completed his PhD there, and his is on vitalism and chiropractic. So it's really a new kind of, we're pushing the boundaries in academia of what is chiropractic and how does chiropractic interface at the university level, which is really cool. And
wow, exciting. Well, I hope that I'll ask the same question rather than share what I hope. You going on this venture of collecting all this historical and philosophical knowledge and making it available so people see this. I know you have a bigger vision than printing books. There's an impact that you are hoping to make on the profession in the world. Can you say anything to that of what you would like to see to come out of the work and the energy that you're putting in?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the PhD itself, it's just extraordinary. What I did was I wanted to look at the chiropractic literature and really understand. I've been reading for years the back and forth in the peer-reviewed literature, the fights in the profession about should chiropractic be more of a musculoskeletal thing and get rid of all those subluxation guys, and I've noticed for years that a lot of the papers that were anti-subluxation, anti-philosophy, there were a lot of problems with the papers, but I didn't have the skill or the methods to really analyze it objectively and really study what was happening. So I did this massive project. I thought it was going to take 2 years, and it took 4 years. Thankfully, the Foundation for Vertebral Subluxation gave me a tuition scholarship, which was wonderful. And then, just to support the project. So basically, what I did was I found all of the papers in the peer-reviewed literature about chiropractic identity, like whether they were saying chiropractic should be musculoskeletal or vitalistic or an adjunct of medicine or subluxation only. We developed a criteria to decide which papers are actually about identity in chiropractic. And then we basically built a network of the peer-reviewed literature by looking at all of the references. Right. So let's say Danny wrote a paper and he had 5 references, and I wrote a paper and I had 5 references, and Danny referenced me, and then say Dan Lemberger wrote another paper with 5 references, and Dan also referenced me. So now we're starting, and any reference Danny, right? So now we've got these 3 hubs, right? Our 3 papers. 2 of them go to me, right, as a little network. one of them goes to you, and then we've got these other strands coming off, right? It's kind of like a web. So I created a web of a network of how all of these papers and all of their references link to each other. There's this whole methodology called social network analysis, where you can create these very complex webs using algorithms and computer generated visualizations. And then you could calculate which of the hubs in the web are the most dominant, which ones get cited the most, which ones are the most influential. There were several different measures to see which papers are the most dominant. So I was able to determine the 31 most influential papers on this whole network of 5,280 papers. So we got down to the 31 most influential, and then looked at those critically and analyzed them for their scholarship and their bias to see, well, how good are these papers that are dominating the whole discourse in chiropractic? And it's pretty devastating what I found. And the profession is going to be kind of shocked when they read this thing, because the papers, especially the papers that are anti-subluxation, anti-philosophy, were found to be incredibly biased and really poor scholarship, like flawed. We developed 5 categories, and the lowest 2 were critically flawed and fatally flawed. And we found that many of the most influential papers were fatally flawed, critically flawed, and fatally biased. So, it's going to impact the profession in, I think, some really significant ways, because it demonstrates that the peer-reviewed literature and the journals and the editors and the peer review boards are just kind of skating these papers through and publishing these papers that are poor scholarship and that are filled with bias. So, and when you think about it, the chiropractic literature is part of science. It's part of the scientific literature. Most of the chiropractic programs in the world are in universities. So the academics in those programs with PhDs really care that their universities and the publications coming out of their universities are of high standards. So this is going to shine a light on the profession and on the chiropractic literature that's not very favorable overall, which is going to be a wake-up call, I think, for a lot of people, which I might make some enemies, I might make some friends, and hopefully my goal is that we'll have a lot of people that will just take it seriously and see how can we do better, right? How can we be more balanced? How can we represent the history of ideas more accurately? And how can we take all the subjectivity out of our debates and start to have a real honest discourse about the value of subluxation and the value of our history and the value of our ideas? So that's one of the biggest impacts that's going to happen. Also, the methods that I used were totally unique, where I was able to use Ken Wilber's 4 quadrants as part of my methodology. And really, I introduced some really new methods into the way that this kind of thing could be looked at. So other professions might be able to use the methods from my thesis to look at the literature in their profession. So it's going to become a whole new standard for people to start to analyze accuracy in literature. So the title of the thesis is Truth, Lies, and Chiropractic.
Well, in our circles, I'll use that general, yours and our circles. It's it's common knowledge that there's been a political and financial agenda in the chiropractic profession, and political financial agenda that's affected research and science and education and licensure. That's, we're well aware of that, and it's very good for you to put the work in to document things so people can have that versus just things that are told as stories.
Yeah, yeah, and that's it. And really, what I had to do was I brought 5 PhDs onto my committee to hold
Wow.
me, yeah, really to hold me to a standard of objectivity, because I've been publishing in this literature for 20 years, and I have my own biases. So in order to be an objective scientist and researcher, I needed to have them hold my feet to the fire to make sure that I wasn't bringing my own bias into the study. So I basically had to do things like I would analyze a Keating paper and take an entire paragraph and blow it up on my screen and pretend it was kind of like I was like looking through a microscope at an amoeba, like I was an objective scientist just saying, all right, what is this paragraph saying? What's its theme? Are the references correct? Without thinking, I can't stand Keating and I'm sure it's biased, right? I needed to
Right.
put all of that stuff aside and really look at all these objectively and read them dozens of times and do that and stay sane at the same time. So it was quite a journey, really.
Well, kudos to you for taking the time and energy that that people have not. And I know that in your knowing you for as long as I've known you, I know in your beingness, I'll say that is um, for the impact that it can have on yes, chiropractic, but more so for humanity because the art science, philosophy science and art of chiropractic is vital for humanity to receive it. And I know that's the underlying reason why for you.
Yeah.
Not just to get a PhD, it's not just to get a degree.
Right. Yeah. 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 This was really a culmination of everything I've been doing for 20 years. And we included 20 of my papers and 5 of my book or about 9 of my book chapters as the appendix. So
Mm-hmm.
currently, when people access the PhD, they're going to see that it's 1,650 pages. But knowing that 1,250 of those pages is the appendix, which include all the different papers that I've published.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been part of this ongoing journey, and this was a way to just kind of bring it all full circle. But in terms of the hopeful side, so in the chiropractic profession itself, I'm going to really step up my teaching, especially online teaching, and really
Mm-hmm.
break down all the different pieces of the thesis and develop courses for people and develop other courses based on all the other stuff that I've been writing and publishing about. Because one of the goals of the Institute is really, or the main goal is to develop a core group of chiropractors worldwide who have the same understanding of the facts, of the historical facts, of the philosophical facts, and have a real understanding of the literature. So they could read a paper in the literature, see that, oh, those 31 papers that Simon critiqued in his thesis, 10 of those are references in this new paper that just came out. So they're going to know instantly that, wow, this might be a little sketchy. Let's read it really carefully, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to give the profession a whole new set of tools, not only to understand the history and philosophy, but to really critically look at the literature. And then, there's this whole body of knowledge out there, which is, the short term of it is kind of the science of science, which is to actually look at peer reviewed literature and see how it grows, how it develops, how it's like a living organism.
Mm-hmm.
And and one of the sort of doctrines that people have demonstrated is that when there's a sort of a leader in the field who publishes a lot and the papers are well done and well cited, and there's a lot of productivity, that it starts to shift the profession or the literature. So one of my goals, especially with my 5 supervisors, we're going to start publishing 4 or 5 papers a year.
Wow.
And what happens is if you do that, the science shows if you do that for 4 or 5 years, you actually seriously impact the discourse and start to shift it in a whole other trajectory. So that's one of the goals. That's what the Institute's going to be about for the next few years, besides teaching, is getting published.
And understand, for people have to, we've heard these comments. You don't need science. You don't need research. You don't need these things. We've heard these, shouted from stages and such. And the reality is that by publishing, whether you agree with what's been published or not, is how medicine has shifted the course of things.
Sure. Yeah. Well, that's how professions work. People
Right.
need to understand that when you're in a profession, it's the peer-reviewed literature that drives the profession. And
Right.
we've sort of been, asleep at the wheel in that regard for
absolutely
decades. Yeah. So it's needed. It's necessary. It's not the only thing that the profession needs.
No, it's not the only thing, but it's vital.
It's vital. It is. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
and I hope that also this inspires more people to follow suit, because we need dozens, if not hundreds, of researchers publishing things. Right.
Yeah. I already had someone reach out to me who I did part one of a on purpose interview with Kent and McCoy about the methodologies. And someone already reached out to me and said, I think after hearing that, maybe I'll go after a PhD in a few years. What should I do? Which is just what we want. And it's possible that in the next year or so, I'll be able to supervise PhDs there myself at Southern Cross. We'll see how that evolves.
That'd be exciting. That'd be exciting. Well, again, I want to encourage people so much to pick up a copy of this book. You don't have to go anywhere to do it. You don't have to go drive somewhere to pick it up. You just have to go to Amazon, okay, and grab a copy. I only got to thumb through it. I didn't get to pick up and read it yet. So I'm very excited. I'm very excited to see what my chapter says. I'm wondering what that is.
So it's so good. And some people, wrote those a year and a half ago. Like we saw Arnaud the other night, and he forgot he was in the book. We were like, Arnaud, you wrote this great story. And he's like, oh yeah, a year and a half ago. You write it off, you send it off, you say thanks. But also when you get on Amazon, make sure you do Amazon for your country. Because people in Australia were having some trouble ordering, but I think they might have been using the links that we posted for Amazon in the US. So make sure you're on Amazon for your country.
I'll tell you, it's a great Christmas gift. Great Christmas gift.
People are buying bunches of them. They're putting that on Facebook. I just bought 5. Somebody, Judy Campanelli wrote, I bought many. Just great.
Well, good. I encourage people to do that. And again, from all of us at Mile High and from the profession as a whole, and those that we know are grateful for you. Thank you so much for the energy, the time that you put into these projects for the betterment of the profession, chiropractic, and humanity that we serve. So it's much grateful. Is there any last thing you'd like to say before we sign off?
Just keep doing what you do. You all are doing such great work. Just keep it up. We put out these books and this work and these lectures and things to support you so that you can have a stronger roots and a stronger foundation to serve the people that you serve. If it helps one of you and helps a few patients here or there, it was worth all the effort. Hopefully it'll help thousands and millions. Just do what you do, and thank you for all that you do.
Well, thank you for all you do. And everyone, remember to hit subscribe. You never want to miss any Mile High tick. And also hit riseuptomilehigh.com and reserve your seats for Mile High 11, September 21, 24. Rates rise January 1st, I believe, which is just around the corner. So, when you make your calendar, make sure you mark up to be on higher ground in September of 2023, and keep changing spines, lives and minds with chiropractic.